If you're coming from my Instagram, this is probably not the video that you were expecting. I was so prepared to have you guys follow me through my behind the scenes of what I do day to day as a vintage boutique owner. Instead, I thought, let me put that aside and maybe work on it at a later date. Instead, we're gonna talk about how I even got here in the first place to be able to own a vintage boutique. Anyways, let me cut the chit chat and let's just get into how I started a vintage boutique at the age of 23. June of 2018 is when I officially opened the doors for the first time to my vintage boutique called Grandma's Basement. Currently, we merge secondhand clothing and new modern accessories to create the ultimate vintage boutique experience. I dubbed it that. I'm definitely biased, but you know, I think it's cute. So you can check it out. I mean, I don't know how much is on the website right now by the time you're watching this, because I haven't been able to thrift, you know what I'm saying? It's a little hard right now, but once I'm able to go thrifting again, grandmasbasement.co is where you can shop all of my vintage finds and accessories, and it's a really fun time. So I'm gonna start off by telling you a little bit about my background, because this pretty much sets the foundation of how I got here in the first place. 3 years ago, I had no intentions of opening any shop. It wasn't even in my mind. I mean, I did have interest in owning my own business. I didn't necessarily know if it was going to be a store. I don't know. If you would have told me then that I'd be in the situation I'm in, I would not have believed you at all. I was so broke. But anyway, I'm getting spoilers. From 2013, I believe. Yeah, I graduated high school in 2013 and then I went to university for about 2 or 3 months. I can't quite remember. It wasn't long at all. I didn't even finish a semester before I dropped out. I went for general studies because I had no idea what I wanted to do at all. But I was kind of pressured from my high school teachers to not take a year off. And so I went to university for something that I didn't want to do and ended up with a $5,000 loan for a semester I didn't even finish. After I dropped out of that, I ended up going to a college in Toronto for fashion business. A lot of people are really confused at what that is. I don't blame you, but basically it's a business degree, but it's heavily revolved around the fashion industry. So if you're looking to get into things like PR or merchandising or visual merchandising, buying, any of those fun things in the fashion industry, that's kind of like what we learned. At this point, I wanted to be a visual merchandiser or a fashion buyer because while I was in school, I had been working the other 3 to 4 days, depending on what semester it is, as a visual merchandiser slash sales associate, which I loved. I really enjoyed doing visual merchandising and I still enjoy it to this day. I have a lot of experience in it. The other days that I wasn't working, I was going to class. Let me tell you about my school, okay? Let me tell you about what I went through. I commuted 2 hours to school because I live 2 hours away from Toronto on a good no traffic day. I chose commuting because I didn't want to pay a lot of money to live in Toronto. It's really expensive to live in Toronto, and once I did all of the math and really analyzed where my expenses were going to be going, I decided that I would just commute. I just bought a new car, so it would definitely hold up through the 2 years that I went to school, and I still don't regret that decision, but doing that was really stressful. I would have to get up at 4 in the morning, get ready for school, which took me about an hour, drive to school in Toronto morning traffic, which takes about 3 hours from where I live, sometimes 4, and hope I would get to school by 8 a.m. I would have class until 6 p.m. At this point, I'm extremely exhausted. Drive another 3 to 4 hours depending on how busy the road is to get home at about 10 p.m. Once I got home, I would have to do any homework that I have, definitely half-ass, until 11 p.m., sometimes 12 depending if I had a test the next day, and then I would have to do it all again the next day or go to work the next day, depending on what day it was. So I was literally living this life 7 days a week unless I took a day off school. Those were horrifying times. Around the end of my college career, I started dabbling a little bit in makeup. If you've been following me for quite some time, or if you know me personally, you remember this time. I worked at Sephora for just under a year. I worked at a cosmetic counter for around the same time, and I also did YouTube tutorials here on my YouTube channel, which I have since privated because they're really cringy, and maybe I'll unprivate them one day, but right now, really cringy. And while I was doing this, I started to build a small little group of supporters, and I was getting PR from ABH, things like that. I truly believed this was going to be my path, just like I believed visual merchandising was going to be my path. But this one hit a little different, you know? I remember one day waking up and messaging my boyfriend like, this is it. This is my path. I'm good at it. People see the value in me. And I really wanted to drop out of my college, but I decided to push through because I already had made it that far and literally was almost graduating in like a few months. And I can go into detail about why I stopped doing makeup in a whole other video, but I just really wasn't enjoying my time anymore. Like the energy around that time, it was just messing up my mojo, you know what I'm saying? So I couldn't be doing that anymore. And then at this point, when I dropped makeup, I had no clear direction anymore. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was floating through jobs for a little bit until I went back to visual merchandising. So I got a job as a visual merchandising manager at Forever 21. And I ended up doing that for about 2 years. Now that I set the foundation of what my life was prior to opening the boutique, let's get into how I turned that into what I have now. It was November of 2017 and Christmas was right around the corner. And let me tell you, this year, I just remember it so clearly. I was dead broke. Dead broke. I had no idea how I was going to afford Christmas presents for my family. So I found myself searching up ways to make money on Google and Pinterest. You broke? You know what I'm talking about. There was a lot of things that I considered doing, but these things were just not what I was looking for. But I was desperate and I actually did a couple of the things that I just look back on and I'm like, what the am I doing? I did a mystery shop once because they paid like $30 for it, and I actually went to a shoe shop and did it, and I had to write a report and everything, and it was just not worth the $30. It was like, it took me like 5 hours. 5 hours for $30? No. As I was looking, I ended up finding myself on Pinterest. I'm more right-brained than left-brained, and so I like more creative things, and Pinterest just had more creative like ways to make money, more crafts, things like that. I ended up finding an article about people who make those like wooden welcome signs. You know, the signs that every white mom has outside of their suburban home where they greet their kids coming home from soccer and go put on the lasagna. Don't come for me, I'm half white. So I decided to do these because they didn't cost much and they're really popular at that time. But problem number one, I ain't got no money. So I took my butt to my grandma and asked her if she would help me purchase the materials to get started with this. She was really supportive of this, so she took me to Home Depot, we got some 2x4s, we got paint, and she allowed me to use my late papa's workshop in the basement for shadowing. Once I had all of my materials, I would go to my grandma's basement and work on these signs. I would do the welcome signs, and then I later introduced the Christmas versions, and those were a hit. I sold these signs for about $25 and ended up making $4,200 profit from these signs in 1 month. Once I did this, I was like, whoa, okay, no one talk to me. Let me buy my Prada, let me buy my Gucci. Just kidding, but I literally had not had that much money in my life. So around the end of November, I started playing with the idea of having my own store. I don't know what I was thinking because I really only had these signs and like, I don't know what I was trying to do, but I thought about it. When I was a kid, I was obsessed with owning my own business, like I said before. I used to set up our VHS tapes as like markets, and like there would be like separate stores with the VHS tapes. I would use my brother's action figures and my dolls as like the business owners and the customers. And my version of House, you know, that game that kids play, was called Store. So I definitely was always interested in owning a store. I just never thought that it would actually happen. I just like the idea of being a business owner. So it all really felt natural to me, like visual merchandising and like makeup. But I'm serious this time, damn it. And I decided if I can paint these wooden signs, I can paint a dresser. So I went to a thrift store and instead I picked up a chair instead of a dresser. You know, they start small. My whole entire life was riding on this chair, okay? It needed to turn out good. I took the chair home, not to my grandma's though, because if it didn't work out, my grandma was disappointed, you know. Grandma disappointment is the worst disappointment. And we can't be out here disappointing grandma. So I went home instead. I spray painted it and distressed it. And I'm hoping I can find the outcome picture because... But at the end of the day, it worked. I mean, I never sold the chair. No one wanted it. But at least I knew it could be done. And it wasn't a failure. So at this point, I started thrifting more and more. I started grabbing more furniture, and I also was adding decor in. So I was like, yeah, I could open a store, you know, I just painted this chair, you know, I'll be doing these signs, I'm doing my little thing. And I definitely was also experimenting with a lot more furniture, and it was turning out, so I was like, yeah, I can do it. I started filling up my grandma's spare bedroom, and she was just like not okay with it. She didn't want it anymore. I was getting kicked out. So I was like, okay, I have nowhere to put all this stuff, and I want to open a store. So let me look for a store. Why not? And literally that night, I found a store. Okay, so I'm in the store right now, so I'm gonna give you guys a little tour. So this is the front store area. So it's super cute, not too big, not too small, a really decent size. We're gonna take out all of the shelving today and just like get it all out. And this stuff isn't mine either. I mean, it wasn't the cutest, you know, it wasn't the cutest, but it was something. and I could afford it if I budgeted correctly. And with that, I started my journey of being a shop owner January 2018. Now, I can't say that I had support from everyone during this time. A lot of my family were skeptical for sure, as most families are. When you say you want to start something untraditional and pretty much unsafe, like it's a huge risk to start your business. So I totally get where a lot of people were coming from. But at the end of the day, my personality type is I'm going to do what I want to do regardless. I'll definitely take in consideration of what you're telling me, but I mean, you know, I just do me. During this time, I also applied for a small business grant. I would definitely look into some free grants that you can get for starting a small business. And I received $3,000 to get started with that. My presentation was horrible, by the way, but I had passion. It took me about 6 months to be able to afford enough stuff to fill up the shop. When I opened June of 2018, I still needed to work full-time to be able to afford my rent, so I would only open weekends to get the ball rolling. Because it was the summer and I just opened, at the time the money was great. Well, in retrospect, it felt like a lot of money because I was so broke for so long that I thought it was a lot of money. It felt really good. I also took on a basketball coaching job if I wasn't already busy enough, which I did Thursday nights and Saturday mornings. This is important to the story later because I was just taking on a lot at the time. Then winter hit. I live in Canada and generally everyone knows, especially if you work in retail, that a lot of things slow down in the winter. People don't go out as much. It's cold, it's inconvenient, it's just not a vibe. But because of this, retail stores make less money. While I did work in retail and I should have known this, I was a new business owner and I didn't prepare for this. And so my revenue was literally cut by about 80%. My shop wasn't in the best location and people just weren't shopping. What I was making at my full-time job was just enough to cover the bills at the shop and leaving next to nothing for anything else. At this point, when people would ask me, you know, how's business, if I would see them, you know, in crossing or if it was family, I would hate it because truthfully, I was struggling, but you don't want people to worry about you, so you put on a happy face and you say, yeah, it's going great. I can confidently talk about this now because I'm in a much better spot, but it's important to me to share this part of my story. For anyone that's thinking about starting a business or is in the same spot that I was so stressed mentally and financially by doing all of these things. But I was invited to go to Cuba by my boyfriend. In the back of my mind, I knew this was not a smart idea because if I missed one weekend of any type of sales, I would be in a hard place, even more so than I already was. I did it anyway. Your girl wanted a vacation. I was stressed, okay? When I got back, the bills started piling up. Plus, I spent money on vacation, which made it even harder because by the time I got back, I didn't have extra money. And yeah, it just put me in a really horrible financial situation. I feel so vulnerable telling this part of my story because I really do put on like a strong face. And I've never told anyone but my mom that I went through this. And that was even way after I went through it. Like when I was going through it, I told no one. But the more we talk about this, the more it will become normalized and people might have a better or easier time talking to people about what they're going through. And I could tell my boyfriend knew something was off because I would just cry about anything. But I ended up going through a really hard depressive state. I've never been in a mindset like that before and I didn't know how to handle it. I didn't understand what it was. I didn't know how to cope with it. And I kept it inside of myself for a long time. I would just cry to my boyfriend and my mom for the dumbest things, knowing deep down I knew what I was going through, but I just wouldn't say that. Like, I would say it was something else. I was frustrated, stressed, generally overworked. My plate was too full, and I was thinking about closing the shop and I just couldn't do it anymore. And that thought also was very hard for me because this was like my dream. I was so proud of it. Like I worked so hard for this, and to close it up and have to explain that to everyone that's asking why, it just all was too much. I felt embarrassed, and looking back on it, I shouldn't have. Now, I want to say that we're not talking like any crazy amount of money. You know, I didn't have debt for the shop or anything, so it was just like my bills were piling up and I didn't have the money to pay them. And looking back on it, this was not the end of the world. You know, I still had a full-time job if this didn't work out, but because of the bad mental state that I was in, it felt like everything was crashing down. And I can't explain why I thought like that, but that's what it does to you. To also make some extra money during the hard winter, I started selling some of my clothes on my personal Instagram, and it was working. I was making a little bit of money, so I ended up introducing clothing to Grandma's Basement, and it instantly was a hit. My customer base went from suburban mom to young adults, more like me, people I identified with more. And then that's when I realized this is Grandma's Basement. I pretty much knew that I wanted to change this into a clothing store, so over the course of the next year I started adding more and more clothing, and I saw a bigger increase in revenue and demand. So it worked out. You know, not everyone's looking for home stuff, but everyone's looking for a little bit of drip. You know, people were coming from outside of the city, from Toronto, to come to Grandma's Basement to check it out. Also at this time, I was promoted at my job, which allowed for a lot more money to invest in the store. So things were definitely picking up, looking brighter, and I guess it just goes to show that if you're going through a hard time, it really does get better. I started setting real goals for the shop, just really figuring out what I wanted to do in the future and what directions I wanted to take. I ended up finding a little book where I wrote down these goals, and I'm going to put it on the screen. I haven't looked at this since I wrote it, and it's so great that I found this because to look back on it, and I pretty much achieved almost all of these. So it just feels really good to see it. So you can see my number one goal was to move to a street called St. Paul Street. This street was in a neighboring city of my current location. It's a much bigger city. The downtown area is more developed, and it had a lot more young adults in the area because it was a student area and there was a school nearby. And knowing that my target market is now more young adults, I felt like this area was just the perfect area to be. There was also a gap in the market for just my region in general for something like Grandma's Basement. So I really wanted to be more accessible and reach more people, and that was the place to do it. Around September of 2019, I finally found an available location. The rent was more than double my current rent, but because I had my new promotion, I felt like I needed to take the risk because this is where Grandma's Basement needs to be. I just knew it. Don't get me wrong, I was extremely nervous about doing it. We were fast approaching winter again. I mean, this was September, and I kept thinking back to last winter and the horrible time that I went through then, and I just really didn't want to go through it again. You know, I kept asking myself, like, what if no one shops? Like, what if no one comes, just like last winter? I decided to do it anyway because I really didn't want to miss the chance of having this location. Now, a little bit after I got the location, my job filed for bankruptcy, and they were completely closing all stores in Canada in the next 2 months. I was about to lose my only consistent source of income. I was so grateful to be able to go to Sweden for 2 weeks before I was able to get the key. And there I pretty much planned out with my boyfriend everything that I wanted to do by the time that I got back. The clear direction of Grandma's Basement, the new logo, how I wanted things to look, the vibe I wanted, what I wanted the store to look like. It was a time to reset and really make it what I thought it was meant to be. When I got back, I got the keys and I started part 2 of my journey. In the month leading up to my opening date, I was having real panic attacks. My heartbeat was racing way too fast every time I thought about it, and I would feel so nauseous because I was so scared. Again, if this didn't work, like, I would have to close my store. There was no going back. I wouldn't have my full-time job to rely on anymore because it's gone, and everything that I worked so hard for in the past, all the hard times I went through, I just was really scared. On the day that I opened, which I believe was November 16th, I got my first customer, which was my coworker. So shout out to her, you know who you are. I was starting to get a bit nervous because in the 10 minutes that my coworker was in the store shopping, no one came in. But as she was cashing out is when a flow of people started coming in. It was so busy, and I had no one who could help me at the store because everyone was working, everyone was busy. But at the end of the day, when it was time to close up, I was just like, what just happened? My store was so empty, and I'm like, I can't open another day like this, so I had to go that night and thrift a whole bunch of stuff, wake up at like 5 a.m. the next day to get it all ready for that Sunday again. And Sunday was just as busy as Saturday. I want to make note that I was still working my full-time job if I didn't make that clear. I didn't want to leave my job prematurely because I wanted to hang on to that income for as long as they were in the country still. In the first 2 months of being open, I doubled what I made all of the months prior, and I knew I made the right decision. By the time I opened up the new store, Grandma's Basement was entirely a clothing store. I think I had a small home section, and I ended up getting rid of that. I hired my first employee December, end of November, and I am so grateful for her. Since I had her, I have been able to do so much more and grow the business so much more because I have had my time freed up. I started introducing more and more modern accessories, which has also helped us expand our brand image and our outreach. On January 1st of 2020, I got myself my own studio office where I can handle my admin work, film YouTube videos, and just a space for myself. Even though my neighbors are loud and annoying and randomly scream a lot. I'm not joking, like they scream at like the top of their lungs. And now we're here in the middle of a lockdown and I'm itching to go thrifting again. There you have it. That is my story. That is how I got from point A to point B. I have so many plans for my little business. I just have a deep desire to grow it, not only like physically, but in all aspects. I really enjoy the process of building my business, seeing what new ideas I can come up with, evolving how I do things, how I can make things better, and just generally building on the brand. All of that is the best part for me. So much so that I can't wait to be able to start another business. And I know exactly what I want it to be, but I ain't gonna tell you. I ain't gonna tell you, it's a secret. And even though I went through the hardest times regarding my mental and financial health, I'm still grateful for that because I learned a lot from that time of my life. I have become much more sensible with my money. I save a lot more, I'm more analytical about my decisions with my money, and I also have since stopped overworking myself. Of course, now it's much easier for me too. I have an employee and I'm not financially stressed, but I do put a lot of value in doing things on my own terms and doing things that really feed my mental health in a positive way. Before I end this video, I want to take a moment to express my deep gratitude to anyone who has supported us this far. Even if you're just clicking on this video now and you had no idea who I am, all the way to the people that have known me since I started everything, or since I even was a fetus, I don't know. So I want to end every business video with one piece of core advice, and here it is. As the saying goes, nothing is free in life, but one thing that is free is hitting the like button, and subscribing, and hitting the notification bell. I'm just joking. Am I? But in all seriousness, I really believe in starting your business and moving slow. Always reinvest your revenue, even if it's $5. Starting your own business is not a race, and everyone is at a different place in their business journey. For a long time, I just opened weekends, and I still worked full-time so that I could afford it. I put all of my extra money back into the business. I slowly added new things like the clothing. I still hand make my price tags to this day, and I'm just now looking into branded price tags. I only just started selling consistently on my website, so that all goes to say that nothing needs to be rushed and nothing needs to be perfect. So don't put yourself in any kind of financial situation just because you're taking a big leap. Only do it when you're ready if you can. Thank you so much for listening to my story and my journey. I hope it helped maybe a little bit, and if not, at the very least, help you go to sleep. I'm really excited to get back on YouTube because I have a lot of ideas and a lot of advice to give and a lot of things to talk about. I'm not joking, I have a 2-page list of YouTube video ideas that I want to do. Problem is, a lot of them have to do with going outside, and thank you again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.
I might have to move back a little bit.